Chapter 15. "What happened?" Mehmet asked. They had gone straight through the carpet shop, into the kitchen, and out through the heavy iron door. The driver, the passenger, Walker, and blue tracksuit in that order. Now they were lined up in front of a desk. Mehmet was sat behind it in a pink shirt, sleeves rolled up, his forearms black with hair. "He jumped," Walker replied. "Dead?" Mehmet asked. Walker nodded. Mehmet lit a cigarette and said something Walker didn't understand to blue tracksuit, who left the room, back through the security door. "What is in the bag?" The leather holdall was slumped on the desk, its shoulder strap dangled across the zip, like a grossogram trying to hide her modesty. "Money." The passenger jumped in. "He says 50 thou." "The original amount borrowed was 40, yes?" said Mehmet to no one in particular. "Uh-huh," the passenger replied. "With interest, pay back 80. Mehmet filled his lungs with smoke. "Then, with the interest accrued by the missed payment, it brought the total amount owed up to £160,000. He exhaled, letting the figure hang in the air with the smoke. The room was quiet. Walker felt numb. He was afraid, not of the Turks, but of closing his eyes that night and what he'd see. Michael jumping, then falling, his scream, his face. The way the train split him in two. Walker winced. Michael's head had buckled backwards as the bottom of the train hit him, and his body had gone under the metal wheels and opened up like a sausage bursting its skin. "Where's the creek?" Mehmet asked quietly. He looked at the gun carriers for answers, who in turn stared at each other. Eventually the passenger blinked and turned away to make a phone call. Walker hadn't been offered a seat this time. He stood in the centre of the room, holding the bag of money, looking past Mehmet to the door at the back of the room, the peephole. He couldn't pull his eyes from it, from that small black dot in the door. It began to grow steadily. Walker watched it as it reached the size of a fist, then a bowling ball, its darkness growing, seeping across the door. Walker blinked. The peephole was a void, a thick liquid and oil, spreading out from the centre of the door, turning the world black, creeping out over the walls and ceiling. It spread across the carpet towards Walker, seeping under his funeral shoes, then twisting to ooze slowly up his shins. Walker felt the weight of the blackness pull at the tight polyester of his trousers. He couldn't move. All the colour had gone from the world, and Walker couldn't do a thing about it. "You knew Michael Carter well, Mr. Walker?" The question came out of the black. "Mr. Walker." A dusky pink pushed at the black, the pink of Mehmet's shirt. Walker could just about make out a horse and rider on its left breast. "I used to," he managed to speak. "We grew apart." His tongue was heavy. Mehmet jabbed his cigarette at the bag behind him. "The money was for him?" "Alone." The darkness held his thighs. "Yes, but still, very generous." Walker tried to swallow, but his fat tongue wouldn't let him. "He'll pay me back." "No, he won't. He's been drawn and quartered by a train." "You seem to be a very trusting man, Mr. Walker." The passenger, who had finished his phone call, mumbled something in Turkish to Mehmet. Walker barely noticed. "I didn't have a choice." He was tired. The dark was like a warm bath. Mehmet slapped the desk and laughed. "Of course you did." His right-angled goatee split wide. "You didn't borrow money from us." Walker watched Mehmet stand and come round to the front of his desk. He brushed some lint off his thigh and squinted up at Walker. "Were you boyfriends? Lovers?" Walker didn't reply. "No, I didn't think you were. But why give anyone £50,000 if you're not in love?" There was a bang on the security door behind Walker. Blue tracksuit checked the hatch, then opened up. It was the man from the car, the one that had pulled up in front of Walker the night before. He entered with a strut, crucifix tapping against his chest. He was followed by another man, younger, shorter. They looked to Walker like a knight and his squire. Voices started up, but he couldn't focus. The black was at his chest. Walker's legs weren't his. The warm black had turned him brittle as Michael's skull when it cracked. Walker looked down. The blackness had seeped inside his torn shirt and was clinging to his ribs. It kept climbing. It grasped his throat. His head swam in it. He had to sit. Ping. The blackness shook. Ping. The blackness paused. Ping. Walker felt the electric run through his body. It fought the blackness. He looked down at his hand, the middle finger of his right hand, the damaged tendon. Ping. Again, Walker bent the tip of his middle finger into his palm and felt the tendon slip off his knuckle with a crunch. The pain shot up from his hand, up his arm and into his chest. It attacked the blackness. The voices in the room lost their muffle. He dragged his finger inwards again, harder this time, feeling the jolt of discomfort hit himself and his daze. He did it faster, rapid fire, upping the tempo till the pain got so bad he ground his teeth together. But it was working, driving back the dark, forcing it to retreat across the floor, back through the peephole to whatever lay beyond. "Are you a rich man, Mr. Walker?" Mehmet had returned to his place at the edge of his desk. Walker noticed his jeans were far too tight for a man of his age. Far too tight for a man of any age. "No, Mehmet, I'm not." Walker relaxed his finger and focused his mind. He could mourn Michael later. Now he had to concentrate on getting out of this shit. Twisting his body with a slow deliberation, he registered every man's position in the room in relation to himself. The two that concerned him, in terms of a physical threat, were crucifix and blue tracksuit. If violence erupted, Walker was confident that the others would just be bystanders. Bystanders with guns, but still bystanders. "I think you are." Mehmet was carrying on with his Bond villain shtick. Walker felt like crushing his eye socket. To be able to get that sort of money together in a day and be willing to just loan it to a friend, that says to me that money isn't much of an object. Yesterday, you stood exactly where you are now and said you are Michael's moral support. I think that's how you put it. Walker noticed the nicotine stains on Mehmet's fingers. They twitched without a cigarette between them. He noticed everything now the dark had gone. "Well, in doing so, you became Michael's insurance, his guarantor, if you like." Walker didn't. "So that if Michael was unable to pay, we should come to you for the outstanding balance, like a parent or guardian, say, who is responsible for their child." "You should have done your research. Credit checks, risk management. You talk like a businessman, but don't act like one. The fault here lies with you, not me, not Michael. You need to take it on the chin, write off the loan, and move on." The whole room smiled. Walker heard a laugh bark out behind him. He turned and saw Crucifix's white veneers shining back at him. He turned back to watch Mehmet light another cigarette. "Thank you for the advice, Mr. Walker, but I'm afraid we cannot do that. Instead, we will keep this money," he patted the holdall, "and speak to the ex-wife to see if she can help with the rest." The door at the back of the room coughed. Blackness spat from the peephole like steam from a geyser. Walker moved his finger, trying to keep it at bay. "She has no money." Walker said it quieter than he would have liked. "Of course she does." It was Crucifix's voice, riding into the room on patent leather brogues. "Her daughter goes to private school, and she was married to a millionaire footballer. She's got plenty of money. By the time they divorced, Michael didn't have a penny. He'd lost it all." "You seem to know everything about these people." Walker knew he'd said too much. He managed a shrug that he hoped was perfunctory. "Michael's a good friend. Was a good friend." The darkness thrummed. Mehmet looked at Walker sideways. Pushing himself off the desk, he went to the back of the room and through the door where the darkness seeped from. Cracking the tendon wasn't working. Now it just hurt. If he could just think straight, then maybe he could act. He forced himself to weigh up his options. At least 2 of the men in the room carried guns, the passenger and the driver, and even through the blackness, Walker was confident that he could reach them before they had time to draw. The crucifix's short goblin squire currently had a foot-long mobile phone in his hand, turned horizontally, and was tapping furiously at the screen. Walker knew that once he saw blood, he wouldn't want any part of it. That left crucifix and blue tracksuit. Unlike the others, they were men, not youths, so when Walker made his move, he knew they'd make theirs. Walker was sure the Greek knight would have a weapon tucked away in his suit, knife, gun, and as for blue tracksuit, one-on-one, Walker fancied his chances, but with other interested parties involved, he wasn't sure. He knew that blue tracksuit would try and get close, use his bulk to crowd him out so Walker couldn't throw anything with real meaning. Then the shorter man would go to work. No, even through the darkness of his thoughts, he knew he couldn't fight his way out. Mehmet returned, closing the door softly and bringing with him a cloud of smoke that added to the dark. "We accept the 50,000 with thanks." Walker didn't remember offering it. "But we do still require the rest." "That's not possible." "Then we'll hurt you. I'll go to the police." "And what will you tell them?" "Everything." "They'll then ask for paperwork, proof of this loan, which doesn't exist." "That doesn't matter. They'll still come here." "And what do you think they'll do?" Mehmet spoke softly between drags on his cigarette. Walker knew the answer. If he went to the police, they would come and ask questions at Kingsland Carpets, questions which would be comfortably batted away by the front-of-house staff with shrugs and denials. Walker could tell the police that he feared for his safety, feared for the safety of Leonie and Hannah, but they would never put them under protection just at his say-so. Mehmet grimaced, as if he had read Walker's mind. "You see?" The dark was in Walker's mouth. It lay across his tongue like treacle. Michael had screamed when he fell. The noise kept sounding in Walker's head. The cry had lasted less than a second before it was replaced by the screech of brakes and the sound of body parts being torn under metal. Through the darkness he saw Mehmet moving towards him, cigarette between his lips. "I'm sorry it has to be like this." He placed a hand on Walker's shoulder. "We don't want to hurt people. We don't want to hurt a 12-year-old or her mother. But please understand, we will. We are here to make a living. We are not a charity. Michael borrowed from us a substantial amount, and we need to get it back with the appropriate interest. It's no one's fault that Michael was a coward, unable to deal with the choices he made." The cigarette crackled between Mehmet's lips. "No one except Michael's." The mud inside Walker's head shifted, only slightly, but enough. Enough to let Walker grab the back of Mehmet's head tightly, holding him still as if he were about to kiss him, but instead driving his free hand into Mehmet's face. Walker didn't notice the cigarette burn his palm as he pushed it through the other man's lips. He kept pushing, feeling it disappear inside Mehmet's mouth, feeling the wetness of the lips as he pushed it past them and down into the gullet. Walker released his grip, and Mehmet staggered backwards. He hacked and coughed and spat. Walker tried to turn and face the inevitable attack, but wasn't quick enough. White-hot pain tore through his torso as his kidney absorbed a crushing uppercut, a pinpoint shot to the organ thrown from 3 feet away. Walker's back curled like a Pringle, and he dropped to a knee. Blue tracksuit was on him. It had to be. Such was the strength. And Walker felt a fist hit the back of his head, hard enough to split the skin and blank him out for a second. He tried to stand, but another blow clubbed his skull, dropping him forward onto all fours. Walker's head swam. He expected and hoped for another hit to the head, one he wouldn't feel, one that blacked him out so he could sleep through the inevitable beating, but it never came. Instead, he felt every kick and stamp rain down on every part of him. They were thrown indiscriminately by every man in the room. "Stop!" Walker heard the voice drift to him. Then voices in a language he didn't understand, and then a huge weight on his body, pinning him chest down to the floor. Blue tracksuit's aftershave swamped him. He felt the cool kiss of metal against his face, pushing the soft flesh of his inner cheek against his teeth. Walker's eyes were at skirting board level. Trainers and shoes filled his vision. He heard someone gulping down liquid and coughing, lots of coughing. Good. Walker hoped the cigarette burned all the way down. Then voices. Someone was trying to grab his arms, to pull them out wide. Walker kept them moving. "What hand are you, Mr. Walker?" Mehmet's voice, much hoarser than before. Walker tried to answer, but the gun in his face didn't let him. The holder pulled it off his mouth. "Your wife says I'm ambi-fucking-dexterous." Walker felt his lower back explode as a punch hit the same spot as before, directly into the kidney. His vision swam, and he went limp. His left arm was pulled out straight, and Walker let it happen. Walker felt the cool touch of a man's hand fasten around his smallest finger. The skin was smooth, and it held it tentatively, as if touching another man's hand was too personal, too delicate. The worn carpet tiles rubbed the skin from Walker's cheek. He watched the crisp lines of Crucifix's suit crumple as he kneeled at the tip of his wingspan. Walker knew what was coming and wondered how much it would hurt. His insides throbbed. The knees on his back grew wider. One placed itself on his right shoulder blade, the other slipped out towards his left humerus. He felt the weight of another body on his legs, but it wasn't necessary. Walker had relinquished control. The soft palm of Crucifix gripped his little finger tighter, then began to pull it up and away from the floor, as if applying a handbrake. Walker felt his skin stretch and expand, then grow taut at the point where the finger attached to the hand. The movement stopped, halted by the limit of acceptable anatomy. Crucifix released his grip slightly to adjust, using the heel of his hand to get better purchase on the digit. Walker shut his eyes. Crucifix began pulling upwards again, slowly, and Walker felt the finger resist, and he prayed for it to give way so the pain would change, alter into something dull, rather than the sharp agony of a body part tearing. Walker locked his jaw as the digit kept going backwards and backwards and backwards, his fingernail now almost flat against his wrist, before finally giving away with a quiet snap. Walker grunted, and the inside of his mouth grew wet. He could feel the central knuckle of the finger flapping, and a numbness spread to the tip. It hadn't broken. Crucifix had dislocated the joint. Despite the pain and nausea, Walker somehow felt a modicum of relief. He knew a dislocation wasn't as damaging as a break. It certainly looked worse, the finger snapping back at a right angle, turning over on itself like a builder's set square, but if Walker could get past the stomach-churning sensation, then he could take the pain. Crucifix said something and got a laugh from the watching crowd. Walker could see the man's face. His smile was white and his stubble immaculate. The cross dripped from his neck, watching the torture from on high. One of the gun wielders from before had his mobile phone out and was filming the action. Walker attempted a deep breath, but Blue Tracksuit's knee crushed his lungs. "Get on with it." Walker spoke through the barrel of the gun that had returned to his cheek. Crucifix's smile wavered, and he shuffled his weight, then grasped Walker's ring finger. With one sharp yank, he snapped back the finger sharply. It cracked like kindling. The pain was more severe because the finger was larger, but again it didn't break, just folded over backwards on itself at the second knuckle. Walker locked his jaw and made no sound. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. He knew he could get through this. Yes, it would hurt, but the stupid fuck wasn't actually breaking his fingers. All he was doing was realigning his skeleton. Yes, that was all. It would go back. Now it was time to suck it up and let Crucifix crack on. Walker was pleased with his joke. He chuckled into the carpet tiles. "He's laughing at you, Greek." Blue Tracksuit's voice came at his nape. Dribble fell from the corner of Walker's mouth. Nothing was permanent. Not pain, not disfigurement. Everything is temporary, life included. 2 fingers down, 3 to go. Crucifix rocked on his knees and changed position slightly. It was at that moment that Walker got scared. The damaged knuckle. The tendon. In all the agony, he'd forgotten. It wouldn't be like the others. It wouldn't snap back so easy. There would be complications. "Wait," he said, despite himself. His voice was filled with spittle. There was a pause, followed by mutters. Trainers shuffled, and Mehmet's loafers came into view. The spray-on jeans he wore just about allowed him to crouch down to Walker's level. "That cigarette. That was a nasty trick. And no, we're not going to wait. Christoph is going to carry on breaking your fingers." Christoph toyed with Walker's damaged finger, pulling it backwards to the point where the tendon slipped on and off the bone like a rusty bike chain. He released the finger and it stayed, the damaged tendon rigid, not allowing the digit to spring back down. "This finger, there's something wrong with it." Walker felt their footsteps vibrate through his cheek as the onlookers crowded round. He tried to buck the heavy man off his upper body, but Olak hammered at the back of his head with his fist until Walker gave up. Crucifix began demonstrating to the others the lack of movement in the finger, pulling it backwards a few millimeters past level, forcing the tendon to slide into the webbing of his index finger and trapping it there. The damaged tendon wouldn't allow the finger any backwards flex. It was rigid, held fast by its own injury. Christoph began to apply sustained pressure to Walker's middle finger. The tendon was just about holding itself together. The others watched as if the Greek was plucking legs from a spider in the playground. "I don't like the internet." Walker heard Mehmet's voice float through his pain. "Anything on a computer screen I find too temporary. I'm more old-fashioned. Newspapers and telephones. But my sister's boy," he nodded at one of the youths, "he's a whiz. He said it wasn't that hard to find. He had to go back a few years, trawl through some celebrity gossip. But, well, anyway, you may have noticed I talk too much. What is it they say? A picture paints 1,000 words." Walker tried to move his arm, buck his body, anything to stop the agony in his finger as Crucifix began to pull harder. "Let me show you why you will pay us what we ask." Mehmet held the phone so Walker could see its screen. The pain threatened to shut down his body, but he fought against the blackness and tried to focus on the phone. The display showed a news story, its headline in blood-red letters. "Football star's fairy tale wedding." Below it was a photograph of Michael and Leonie emerging from a church, all confetti and teeth. A younger, thinner version of Walker loitered just behind them. He felt the tendon tear into strips, the bones snap, and he screamed.